Trump gave a speech on the economy, trying to break out of the weird a little bit. If we want to move on to some of that, here's Trump yesterday at one of his addresses. This is, I believe, B1.
Now, this is a little bit different day because this isn't around. We're talking about a thing called the economy. They wanted to do a speech on the economy. A lot of people are very devastated by what's happened with inflation and all of the other things. So we're doing this as a intellectual speech. You're all intellectuals today. Today we're doing it, and we're doing it right now, and it's very important. I gave Harris and Biden an economic miracle, and they quickly turned it into an economic nightmare with a nation-wrecking agenda ripped straight out of Kamala's San Francisco liberal playbook, what they've done. And we will do something else which was copied, viciously, ruthlessly copied. No tax on tips, okay? No tax on tips. You know, if they wanted to do that, why didn't they do it 3.5 years ago? They didn't want it. It was actually the opposite. They hired 88,000 IRS agents to go after these people. Kamala and Joe tried to take credit for $35 insulin. You know that. You know who did that? I did that. I did the insulin, and it kicked in. And I remember when I did it. To help seniors on fixed incomes who are suffering the ravages of inflation, there will be no tax on Social Security. We're going to stop it. No tax on Social Security. This cruel double taxation of Social Security benefits, and this has been talked about for a long time. She'll probably announce this on Friday, too.
That was, I liked how he ended that. It's like, she'll probably say on Friday that she's going to do this, too. And after that, he pointed out, there's Kamala's guy is like taking notes on my policies. Because he is so, burnt up about the fact that she picked off his no taxes on tips policy.
Yeah.
And also burnt legitimately by the fact that when he proposed it, the media was like, this is a terrible policy that will be filled with loopholes that will benefit hedge funds and private equities, which is true. And then when she proposed it, they're like, this is great, great for the service workers.
Yeah. The original coverage, by the way, was the correct coverage. No taxes on tips. It has a lot of intuitive appeal. And I understand, of course, you want to cut service workers a break. The much better way to do that is to get rid of that tip minimum wage altogether, or at least the very least raise it. Because as you point out, one of the problems with it is next thing you know, you've got hedge fund managers saying, this isn't income, this is a tip, so it doesn't get taxed. So in any case, yes, he is very salty about the fact that she picked that up and copied him in a speech out in Las Vegas. I don't know if you watched this whole speech, Ryan, but the funny thing about it is it was very clear the whole time that it was like his advisors told him he had to give this speech and, twisted his arm and wrote up the script for the teleprompter and whatever. Because the whole time he's just trying to run away from the actual core content of the speech as much as possible and go on his normal, tangents about what he thinks about Joe Biden dropping out and how Kamala Harris is far left. And he said about Harris and Walz. He said, they're actually beyond socialists. I think they skipped over socialists. So it was more of the greatest hits with a little bit of the economic script sprinkled in. He also made this comment that kind of gave away that his arm was being twisted to talk about this stuff, which apparently he really didn't care about. He says, they say the economy is the most important subject. I think crime is right there. I think the border is right there. We have a lot of important subjects. So even in the speech where he's supposed to be leaning hard into the economy, he's sort of undercutting it. And the reason I bring this up is just, this is the challenge for the Trump campaign. They were doing much better, obviously, when Joe Biden was in the race. But when Trump was just kind of not doing all that much and letting the issue landscape speak for itself, now they've got a really clear edge, especially on immigration. If you ask voters, they've got a clear edge still in almost all polls on the economy, although that edge with Kamala Harris seems to be shrinking. You've got some things to work with there, but he's Trump. He's not going to follow your script. He's not going to just read your economic policy speech off the teleprompter and really lean into that and make that a core message. right now he's finding it incredibly difficult to move on from Joe Biden. So even in this speech, he's still talking about Joe Biden getting taken off the ticket and, all of these sorts of things that he finds to be very unfair and is his own personal grievance. So in any case, that's some of what's going on there. At the same time, we've got Kamala Harris, who to this point hasn't really announced any policy to speak of. Most of what she's done, as you mentioned before, Ryan, was like, tell us what she's not for. Like, I'm no longer for Medicare for all, no longer for that fracking ban, like running away as fast as possible from those sorts of positions. But we are supposed to get some specifics of an anti-price gouging policy this week in a speech that I believe is happening Friday. We can put this up on the screen. She apparently sees it to really be in her interest to try to separate her economic policy and vibes from the current president, Joe Biden, who, of course, is very unpopular on the economy. So on Friday in North Carolina, she's going to outline a plan to lower costs of healthcare, housing, food. Polls, they say, show an opening for reset on economy and inflation not defined by Biden. Look for an emphasis on the prosecutor background, including price-fixing fights as the California Attorney General. We can put the next piece up on the screen because just this morning we got some specifics about what she's going to be looking at here with regard to her initial policy proposals. The Politico headline says grocery price gouging to feature prominently in Harris' economic plan. And they say, in addition to her push for the first ever federal ban on price gouging by food corporations, she would also direct the FTC and state attorneys general to investigate and levy penalties on food companies that violate the ban. She's also going to argue Trump's plans, including threats to slap new broad tariffs on U.S. imports, will only drive up costs for food and other everyday items. So on the corporate power piece, Ryan, certainly our friend Matt Stoller is going to be very happy about this direction that she's choosing to take her campaign in from the very initial onset of the first policy pronouncements.
And it's a good fight to have because they're also able to divide. It divides Democrats because a lot of kind of neoliberal Democrats, really recoil at the idea that you can have the government doing anything about prices and about profits. But those Democrats, because of partisan concerns, are going to shut up right now. So you're not going to have that fight, which is terrific benefit for that policy. On the right, you're going to have a little bit more division because the J.D. Vances of the world, very much do believe that it is the government's role to go in and investigate a corporation if it is price gouging. Like that is squarely within that kind of new right, populist nationalism. But it runs up against all the free market ideology that dominates so much of the rest of the Republican Party. So that could kick off some interesting kind of internal turmoil among those. But there's long been this idea for the last 50 years or so that the government should just stay out of prices. But that historically has not been the case. Governments all around the world forever have done some version of price controls. We currently have price controls when it comes to we control our interest rate policy. We control our energy prices. Whether it's through utilities or whether it's through our use of either our military or our strategic petroleum reserve when it comes to gas prices, or whether it's our influence with OPEC. We control wages. Like if we see the price of labor, going up, the Federal Reserve comes in and wraps workers right on the knuckles and makes sure that those wages go right back down. So all this is saying is that we'll extend this general idea to corporate profits. And if there is price gouging going on, they're going to come after that. What that means, remains to be seen. How Harris tries to even come close to defining that is an open question. It also suggests that she would need Lina Khan. Like the idea that you're going to lead with something that is the FTC's purview and that requires an aggressive FTC, but you're also going to get rid of Lina Khan, just doesn't match. So it feels like she's winning this fight against Reid Hoffman right now. What's your sense there?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that. And there was another, policy personnel choice that people were paying attention to that I'm interested. Your take on, Ryan. We can put this up on the screen. So Brian Deese is back. This is some reporting from Brian Schwartz, who's a good reporter over at CNBC and advising Kamala Harris on economic policy. David Dayen comments here, Deese has a resume to upset everyone, BlackRock experience, but he was also a good on the National Economic Council that crafted much of the break with typical Dem policy on industrial manufacturing, full employment, and more. I look at what he did in office and say it's good to have him in there. I know Matt Stoller, as I mentioned before, also very pleased with this pick. And on the corporate price gouging piece in particular, a couple things that were noteworthy to me is, number one, at least some of what Kamala Harris is talking about in the speech on Friday are things that you can do with just executive power. So even if you don't have Republican, if you still have a Republican Senate in particular, you can still take a lot of action here, as Lena Khan has as FTC head. The other thing is, as indicative of Brian Deese as being the carryover, like some of this stuff has been done by the Biden administration. There was originally, when progressives like you and I were talking about how corporate price gouging was an important part of the inflation picture, we were practically, laughed out of the room. Like all the mainstream, oh, that's preposterous. It's just government spending, blah, blah, blah. The data became undeniable that this was perhaps the most significant part of the inflation picture. And so while Biden did a little nibbling around the edges with regard to the meat packing industry in particular, number one, he's just not able at this point to really clearly and forcefully articulate this case and prosecute this case. And number two, he seemed to be uncomfortable with it, and he had people in his orbit. There continued to be this internal divide over it's not appropriate to call out corporate power. It's not appropriate to go after these companies. There continued to be a reluctance and a hesitation to publicly make this case. But it's the data backs it up. It's a very strong both reality case, but also political case to go after. The American people have long said that these corporations are price gouging, that they don't have to charge these high prices and, make you pay through the teeth at the grocery store, et cetera. So I think it's a very strong place for her to stand politically. And I also think it's a very strong place for her to stand in terms of actually making a difference in people's lives here.
Yeah, and to have tough antitrust enforcement is also a way to police this pricing problem, because what it tells companies is that there is one of the limits on what you can charge people is that you're going to draw the attention of the FTC. Like if your profit margin, goes from 5% to 25%, then the FTC is going to wonder, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. If this was a competitive market, and you're jacking up your prices by 25% and just taking it back as profit, some other competitor ought to be able to come in and undercut you on price. That's how the market works. And if that's not happening, then you're doing something illegal. You're breaking the Sherman Act somehow when it comes to monopolization and antitrust, and we're going to investigate and we're going to cause problems for you. And so even if a company is a monopoly, they may want to continue to fly under the radar by keeping their prices low. And if that's the result of that for consumers, that's not just as good as having monopolies broken up, but from a consumer perspective, it keeps prices down and it makes it so that you can afford more groceries. So that's a win. So it's really a win-win to have both of these things working together.
Yeah, that's right. And it's also an area I feel where the bully pulpit actually does matter. Where if you have the president calling you out in, campaign speeches or in the State of the Union or in a press conference, et cetera, that you now have the eye of the federal government trained on you potentially for those sorts of enforcement actions. So having someone who is able to, in a just clear and consistent way, make this case actually matters quite a lot. The other thing that you and Emily, I think, touched on some, and we'll just skip over this from Tim Walz at AFSCME. He also talked a lot about specifics with regard to labor and continued to advocate for the PRO Act. So that seems to also be on the agenda as a priority action item. The other thing that was noteworthy, we can put this last element from this block, guys, up on the screen, is the Harris team has really shifted the type of ads that they are running against Donald Trump. So the headline here from the Washington Post, Democrats ad shifts from Trump to abortion and economy with Harris as the nominee. They did an analysis of data from the political research firm Ad Impact. They found that they are now running much more on these issues, abortion and the economy, versus the threat to democracy, et cetera, really fixating on Trump type of ads that the Biden team was running. And, we had shown earlier in the week on Monday, I believe, some of the message testing from the Reid Hoffman aligned polling hack, put out some message testing on how Kamala Harris should approach this race. And what they found, I think, is not that surprising, which is that you're not going to change how people think about Donald Trump. They think about Donald Trump what they think. No, it's not like you're going to see an ad on TV and be, oh my God, you're right. He is a threat to democracy. I never thought of it that way, right? So I think the Harris team is smartly looking at that data and saying, okay, well, instead of endlessly moralizing about Donald Trump, which people already feel about however they're going to feel about, we need to bolster Kamala Harris on the issues where she needs strengthening or where she's already strong. And we need to attack him specifically on the abortion, try to knock down his numbers on the economy. So maybe Kamala Harris even has an edge on the economy. I think it's a much more intelligent political strategy that they're pursuing here with their ad spending.
Yeah, for most people, if you're 60 years old or younger, Trump has been famous your entire adult life. Since you became cognizant of the news, Trump has been famous. So I think that's exactly right, that there's no 30-second ad that you're going to run that's going to all of a sudden change people's minds. So the better approach is, okay, yeah, Trump is this thing, but we're going to do this. Whether it's codify Roe or we're going to crack down on corporate price gouging. Whatever you think of Trump, here's what we're going to do. So good for them. This whole, because it forces them to actually then come up with something. And we're 3 or 4 weeks into a Harris campaign at this point. Maybe it's less than that. I can't keep track of time.
Me neither.
but it's funny that this is basically the first thing we're getting. So that her campaign deserves an enormous amount of criticism for. The fact that it's a good thing, we'll take that.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.